Consider this: in numerous significant occurrences, it's often the minutiae that can determine success or failure. For instance, in 1986, the Challenger space shuttle tragedy was attributed to a faulty O-ring, an inexpensive component that cost mere dollars. This oversight resulted in the loss of 7 lives and hundreds of millions of dollars. Similarly, it's frequently noted that even a tiny blood clot, invisible to the naked eye and detectable only under a microscope, has the potential to be fatal. When such a clot obstructs blood flow to a vital part of the brain, it can lead to loss of life due to a minuscule aggregation of adhesive cells. Likewise, a small patch of black ice on an otherwise dry road can cause a vehicle to skid out of control, leading to a fatal crash. The slightest deviation in wheel traction on a sharp turn can result in the loss of life. The pattern continues. Often, it's an inconspicuous factor that can sabotage a significant endeavor. But let's consider, can we categorize marriage as a significant endeavor? I do. I view my marriage as a significant commitment. I've been married to April, a wonderful woman, for just over 8 years. Together, we have 2 amazing sons, Chris and Charles. Chris bears my name as his junior, while Charles is named after my father. We reside in a comfortable home, spacious enough for our growing family. Though I lack a college degree, my career as a master mechanic provides us with a stable income. Despite the long hours I invest in my work, the financial security it brings makes it worthwhile. I've always regarded my marriage as the pinnacle of my life, and I've labored diligently to provide for my family, treating it with the utmost seriousness as a significant undertaking. Yet, what ultimately fractured my marriage was something seemingly insignificant. In my case, it was a small blood vessel in my brain positioned too closely to another, which, under specific conditions, would occasionally swell and make contact. This led to debilitating migraine headaches, such as the one I experienced on that pivotal day. The symptoms were classic: sensitivity to light, amplified sounds, and intolerable odors. It struck suddenly, catching me off guard. Regrettably, I didn't have my Imitrex inhaler with me, the most effective remedy, and the pills I had were less potent. It would take time for them to alleviate the pain to a bearable level, time I couldn't afford to lose at work. Stumbling into my boss's office, I delivered the grim news. Concerned, he hastily summoned his secretary. "Get him home. It's nearly quitting time anyway, so don't worry about the hours. Clock him out and give me his card. And for heaven's sake, don't let him drive. Go, now." With Penny's assistance, I rose from my seat, and together with my boss, we made our way out of the office and towards the exit. Outside, Penny supported me against the wall while she fetched her car. Unable to tolerate the brightness, I kept my eyes shut and applied pressure to my temples, desperately attempting to alleviate the agony. Once settled in the car, I reclined against the seat, attempting to block out the overwhelming pain that intensified with each passing moment. Light became unbearable, prompting me to tightly shut my eyes, while sounds reverberated as a deep, throbbing echo in my head, and odors induced nausea. Thankfully, Penny, familiar with my address, required no direction as she drove. The journey felt interminable, but eventually, she halted the car, came around to my side, and assisted me out. I followed her lead, utterly reliant on her guidance. Indoors, Penny supported me to the kitchen, where I instructed her to retrieve the injector from the refrigerator. With the device in hand, I relied on her to steady me as I administered the medication into my nostril, inhaling deeply as the aerosol reached my lungs and swiftly entered my bloodstream. Guided into the adjacent family room, I lay down on the couch, requesting closure of blinds and extinguishing of lights. Patiently, she waited until I signaled the onset of relief before departing. Grateful for her assistance, I embraced the ensuing silence upon her departure. Drifting into slumber as the pain subsided, I awoke later to distant voices amidst the darkness, signifying the passage of time. Sensing the absence of pain, albeit with residual soreness, I cautiously sat up, apprehensively awaiting any resurgence of agony. Thankfully, it did not return. In the dimness, I recognized the voices of my wife, April, and her neighbor, Robin. Initially considering surprising them, I paused as their conversation caught my attention. "Tell me everything, April. Was it as amazing as before? I want all the juicy details." It was beyond words. I felt like I was in ecstasy. He surpassed himself this time. I swear, I reached climax multiple times before he did. It was mind-blowing. The best I've ever had. Even better than Chris? Better than your husband? Absolutely. I adore Chris, but he's never made me feel like that. Never. Though, to be fair, I've never allowed him to do those things to me either. He'd probably think poorly of me if I did. But doesn't Carl think you're being unfaithful? Sure, but I'm his partner in this. And I revel in it. I can hardly wait for the next encounter. Aren't you concerned about Chris discovering the truth? What if he finds out? Have you considered the consequences? You're taking quite a risk, you know. Chris will never find out. And even if he did, what's the worst that could happen? He wouldn't take any drastic measures. He's a kind soul, and he'd forgive me. He wouldn't initiate a divorce and jeopardize his relationship with the kids. He adores them, and he knows I'd fight tooth and nail to keep them. All I'd need is a shrewd lawyer, and he'd be at a disadvantage. This isn't like you, April. I've never heard you speak this way about Chris. How can you claim to love him while talking like this? It's unsettling. I genuinely think you're making a grave mistake. I love Chris. Truly, I do, but I also don't want to give up what I have with Carl. I want both. I crave the passion I share with Carl and the affection I have with Chris. I need both, and I won't relinquish either. Having heard enough, my migraine may have dissipated, but the ache in my heart surged in intensity. The pain was so profound that it constricted my stomach and left me breathless. A ringing echoed in my ears, and my pulse thundered in my temples. I feared I might suffer a cardiac episode, clinging to the doorframe until some semblance of composure returned. Still concealed, the anger simmered within me, reaching a boiling point. I straightened my posture, lifted my head, and stepped into the illuminated kitchen. An abrupt silence fell when Robin noticed me first. Her eyes widened in shock, her mouth forming an astonished O. She instinctively covered her mouth with her hand, uttering a soft, "Oh my God." April turned to see the source of Robin's reaction, her expression shifting from contentment to surprise, then to apprehension, and finally to anger, all within an instant. She pushed her chair back and rose to confront me. "How much did you hear? Why were you eavesdropping and spying on me?" I remained silent, locking eyes with her. My gaze shifted to Robin, who promptly stood and stated, "I need to leave. Pete and I will look after the boys unless you come to get them. I'll call you later." With that, she hurried out through the side door, leaving without a word. Once she departed, I turned my gaze back to April, realizing she was the woman I had unconditionally loved for the past 8 years, the happiest years of my life. I had anticipated spending the rest of our days together, but that expectation now lay shattered. There would be no forever for us, no growing old side by side. April had obliterated that hope tonight. "Where are the boys? What did you do with them while you were with your lover? Did you take care of them, or was it more enjoyable to have another man while they were left alone?" My tone was now composed and icy, though the pain still cut deep. It would take a long time for that pain to subside. Days upon days of excruciating torment lay ahead, taxing all my strength. April's anger contorted her once beautiful face into an ugly mask. Perhaps this mask was the real April, the one I had never truly seen but who had been lurking within all along. She retaliated, "The boys are with Carly. Robin and I were out shopping, and Pete was babysitting for me. I wasn't with anyone else, just Robin." With this revelation, she seemed to believe she had scored a point. Her expression shifted from anger to smug satisfaction. Finally realizing I had been home all along, she inquired, "What are you doing home? Where's your car, and why were you sitting in the dark? Were you spying on me? Trying to catch me doing something?" I came home early with a severe migraine. George had penny drive me home since I couldn't bear the light. I took my medication and fell asleep. I've been here ever since. A tremor churned in my stomach, and the urge to vomit overwhelmed me. I rose and continued, staggering towards the bathroom. Your voices woke me, and what I heard turned my stomach. I need to use the bathroom, so if you'll excuse me. With that, I rushed to the bathroom, attempting to purge the contents of my stomach. Though unsuccessful, my body certainly made the effort. I sat on the bathroom floor, my cheek pressed against the cool porcelain as my body gradually calmed. Eventually, my stomach ceased its rebellion, and my breathing steadied. Sweat dried on my face as the urge faded away. After a few more moments, I rose, splashed water on my face, and rinsed my mouth. Once the shaking subsided, and I regained some semblance of control, I returned to the kitchen where April sat, staring out the window. I'll go get the boys and put them to bed tonight. I brushed past her and stepped out, heading next door to the Andersons. Pete and Robin Anderson were our neighbors and closest friends. We often spent evenings on each other's decks, sharing conversation and drinks. They were good friends, or so I had thought. I wondered what Pete knew. I needed to ask. Climbing the steps to their back door, I knocked once and entered. Robin sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, engaged in conversation with her husband. It appeared she had already informed him. He glanced up at me with a pitying expression, while Robin seemed visibly frightened. Are the boys ready to go home? I addressed Pete, already heading towards the family room where I presumed the boys were playing with Carly, their teenage daughter. I found them engrossed in a puzzle, Carly keeping watch over them. She greeted me with a smile as I entered. Hi, Mr. Phillips. Did you come to pick them up? Carly asked, and upon my nod, she said, I'll fetch their jackets. As I observed them, a wave of sadness washed over me. Scenes like this, the simple joys of family life, seemed casualties of infidelity. They were forever altered, shattered by the unfathomable selfishness of one or both adults. In most cases, irreparably so. This appeared to be one of those cases. Thanks, Carly. I'll be in the kitchen when they're ready. I returned to the kitchen where Pete and Robin remained seated. I glanced at Robin, then at Pete. Did you both know? Were you aware that she was cheating on me? Did it give you some perverse satisfaction knowing while we were together? My anger surged, and my words came out harsher than intended, but I needed answers. I needed to understand what my dear friends knew. I had to know. Pete shot a glance at Robin, anger etched on her face, before responding, I didn't know a damn thing, buddy. I swear, if I had, I would have told you immediately. I can't believe my wife knew and kept it from me. That's really low. You didn't deserve that. I won't apologize for my wife's actions, but I'm here for you if you need me. Pete's gaze remained fixed on his wife, his anger palpable. I believed him. He would have informed me if he had known. So, it was Robin and April's secret. Then I owe you thanks, Robin. Thanks for allowing me to become a joke, a cuckold, a clueless husband while my wife was with another man. I hope it made you feel good, knowing what you knew, relishing in her escapades. I turned when I noticed Carly nearby, quickly plastering a smile on my face as the boys emerged, each clutching a cookie. I silently prayed Carly hadn't overheard my last remarks, and judging by her expression, she hadn't. I commented on the boys' treats as I ushered them out the door, heading home without a backward glance. It would be the last time Robin would ever be with my boys. That much, I vowed. I didn't know how, but I would try. We entered through the back door, the boys darting upstairs to change for dinner. I traversed the empty kitchen and found April in the dimly lit family room, sitting in the darkness much like I had earlier while my world crumbled. I flicked on the table lamp beside the couch and drew back the curtains, allowing the waning daylight to filter in. Yet, instead of illumination, the room seemed filled with shadows, dark corners representing the concealed secrets my beloved wife harbored. April appeared disheveled. Her eyes were red, tears still lingering, her complexion pallid, her shoulders slumped. The rage and defiance had vanished, leaving behind a frightened woman, as one might expect. However, it was too little, too late. Rather than filling me with hope, her sudden contrition disgusted me. Now she was remorseful? Now she was fearful? I couldn't accept such a swift change. No, this was merely the opening move in a battle for dominance. This was the face of a deceitful, cunning wife, not one of regret. I turned to her, my mind swirling with questions. Who is he? What does he offer that I don't? She remained silent, her gaze fixed on me until I began to turn away, thinking she wouldn't respond. Finally, she spoke. His identity doesn't matter, and it's not about comparing you to him, Chris. I'm deeply sorry you had to learn about this in such a way. It was never my intention for you to find out like this. I never wanted to cause you this pain. I'm truly sorry you overheard what I said to Robin. Please, try to understand. Please. Isn't it strange? No, I regret it. No, I wish it never happened. No, it won't occur again. Just remorse that I got caught, and you had to confront it. I shook my head as I sank into the recliner she had gifted me for our 5th anniversary. Despite my affection for it, it now felt like just another piece of furniture. Please, let me explain. Our relationship doesn't have to end because of this. We can move forward as we were before. We can, if you'll only try to understand. Will you? Her eyes pleaded with me, a familiar expression when she wanted something I disagreed with. Deceptive woman. Can you assure me it's over? Can you promise me you'll never see him again or be with him again? Is it truly finished? I maintained my composure, my body tense, gripping the chair's arms tightly for control. April looked at me, tears welling in her eyes, streaming down her cheeks. She didn't respond. That silence was answer enough. She wouldn't stop. I recalled her words to Robin. She desired both of us and wasn't willing to relinquish him. She wanted me to accept it. I suppose that's your response. I'll put the boys to bed after dinner, then we can discuss our options. Tomorrow, I'll gather my belongings and stay with my brother for a while. I stood and left the room, heading to the kitchen. It's curious how the kitchen becomes a refuge in times of turmoil. Why is that? Strange thoughts arise when your world is crumbling. Even stranger to acknowledge your world is indeed crumbling. April prepared dinner while I spent time with the boys in the playroom, cherishing the simple joys. When dinner was ready, we gathered upstairs, the boys lively as ever. Amid their noise, April and I sat quietly, lost in our thoughts, contemplating the repercussions and decisions ahead. Dinner that night was strained. The boys, oblivious to the tension, reveled in their camaraderie. Compared to their parents, who sat silently, each immersed in their own contemplations. Oh, the innocence of childhood fading into adulthood. Why are children in such a hurry to grow up? They see the freedom of adults and perceive it as limitless. They witness decision-making without grasping the consequences. They witness independence without comprehending the responsibilities. Adults understand better. Yet, some choose to see freedom as boundless, decisions as consequence-free, and rules as optional. Like April. After dinner, April took care of the dishes and tidied the kitchen while I escorted the boys upstairs to bed. We chatted, read a couple of stories, and enjoyed each other's company for an hour until they finally succumbed to sleep. Standing at their bedroom door, I dimmed the light and watched as they snuggled under the covers, ready to embark on their journey into dreamland, where endless possibilities and new discoveries awaited. My eyes stung with tears, and a lump formed in my throat as I observed. This too would come to an end. Descending to the living room, I settled into my chair, grasping for something to anchor myself to. It felt like my world was slipping away, and I was powerless to halt its descent. I had loved April with all my being, yet I couldn't shake off the words I'd overheard in the darkness. He's never made me feel like that, and I'm his slut. No. There was no returning from those words. I felt the love within me wither as I pondered the possibilities. April entered and took a seat. We need to talk. I understand you're upset, but you have to comprehend. What I have with Carl is purely physical, the thrill of something new. I know it will fade soon, but right now, I can't seem to break free from it. It has a grip on me, but it hasn't changed how I feel about you. I love you, not him. He's just a distraction. It will all end soon, and we can go back to how things were. You just need to let it run its course. Her words flowed, but I couldn't grasp their meaning. Let it happen. Let it continue. Am I hearing you correctly? I was stunned. Was she delusional? Regardless, this had to stop. Now, I'm sorry, but you're mistaken. There is no us. There's only you and him now. You and I are finished. There's nothing to discuss. After 8 years of marriage, you should know me well enough to realize I could never accept your infidelity. But Chris, I love you. You're the only man I've ever loved. I don't love Carl. Please try to understand. Give me time. For the sake of our marriage and family, please, baby. Take all the time you need. Tomorrow, I'll contact a lawyer and we'll divide everything fairly. I don't want to hurt you as you've hurt me. I just want this to be over. Emotionally drained, I longed for oblivion, a respite from the ache in my heart. But what followed caught me off guard. Fine. No divorce, then. I'll fight you every step of the way. I'll take everything you have. You won't get custody of the boys, and I'll restrict your visitation rights as much as possible. If you won't give me this time for myself, it'll cost you everything, and I'll still have Carl. You can't stop me, you know it. April's words sliced through the air, dripping with venom. As I absorbed her tirade, it dawned on me that our marriage had been on life support for some time. This level of animosity and disrespect didn't manifest suddenly, it was calculated and deliberate. She hadn't fretted about hurting me, otherwise, she wouldn't have ventured into infidelity. Instead, she had anticipated my discovery and opted to inflict maximum pain. There was no love left, only greed and a desire to degrade me. Watching her, my anger surged. My expression must have revealed that she had crossed a line. Her face, contorted by her spiteful words, shifted from smug satisfaction to genuine fear. My response was swift and cutting. I have one thing to say, April. When you corner a rat, it'll fight back. It'll fight to the death when you strip away any chance of escape. You should have remembered that before pushing me. But now you've learned, and you'll pay the price. Chris, please. I don't want this, but I'm left with no choice. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you from leaving us. If you won't understand and accept that, I'll fight you. You'll have no option but to stay with me. I know you. You love me and the boys too much to go. I know you, Chris. You'll stay. Goodbye, April. Tell the boys I'll see them when I can. I'll grab a few things and leave. The rest I'll collect later when we arrange a time. I swiftly packed a bag with essentials, just enough for a day or so. Not much after 8 years of marriage. But I had my sons, and that was all that mattered now. Returning downstairs, April sat by the kitchen door, determined to make one last plea. Chris, please don't do this. I'm begging you, don't. Tell me it's over with him. Promise you'll never see him again. Then maybe we have a shot. I can't. Please. I brushed past her, resisting the urge to lash out physically. I'll stop by in the evenings after work so the boys won't notice immediately. I left, the door slamming behind me as I tossed my bag into the truck and drove off. En route, I dialed my brother Clyde. He lived nearby in a small subdivision, alone since his wife left with a friend 2 years ago. Clyde was a heavy drinker, usually out with his buddies most nights. Despite our disagreements, he continued his habit, perhaps trying to drown his memories. But that was just my perspective. He answered, offering me a place to stay and assuring me not to worry. So, I drove to his place, retrieved the key from under the planter on the porch, and let myself in. As always, his place was immaculate. Clyde was many things, but messy wasn't one of them. It was a small comfort to see everything in its place amidst the chaos of my own life. I checked the fridge, found a few beers, and made myself at home, following his suggestion. By the time Clyde returned, I was pleasantly buzzed, having picked up more beer on the way. When he arrived, all I could muster was to tell him that April and I were having a fight. His response was simple, yet fitting. Well, shit, bro. It summed up the situation perfectly. To ease my burden, he sat down and joined me in drinking the remaining beer, a gesture of solidarity as my brother. The next morning, I woke with a brutal hangover and a pounding headache, a consequence of my excessive drinking. It was a reminder that despite the turmoil in my life, I couldn't drown my sorrows in alcohol. I found a note from Clyde, informing me he was at work and that I could take the day off too, considering our Saturday shift. As I stood under the cold shower, trying to clear my head, I reflected on my job and its importance. Clyde and I worked as mechanics for a company leasing heavy construction equipment, a job that demanded long hours but provided well for our families. It was my responsibility to provide for mine, to ensure their security and well-being. But last night, April shattered that illusion. She saw our home not as a sanctuary for our family, but as a bargaining chip in a potential divorce. She viewed it as a means to fund her extramarital affair, indulging in luxurious purchases for her lover. The thought churned my stomach, prompting me to increase the water flow to drown out the intrusive thoughts. Despite being late for work, I knew I had to face the day. It was the only place where I could think clearly, plan, and make decisions. April's calculated betrayal revealed her true intentions, exploiting my shock to advance her divorce strategy. She aimed to vilify me, portraying herself as the victim while demanding to continue her affair. She underestimated me, but I wouldn't let her manipulate me into accepting her infidelity. She may have thought herself clever, but I would not be her pawn. I dressed and grabbed a box of large trash bags, knowing April and the boys would be out for the day. They were off to her mother's for a birthday celebration. Arriving at the house, I began emptying my closet and drawers, tossing everything into bags. I gathered my essentials from the bathroom, packed a small overnight bag, and loaded everything into my truck. But I wasn't leaving just yet. I planned to return after work to spend time with the kids. There was much to ponder and decide, but one thing was certain: my marriage was over, and April would never be my wife, lover, or confidant again. As tears welled up, I sat on the floor of our former bedroom, grappling with the weight of loss. At work, I threw myself into my tasks, immersing myself in the challenges of machinery repair to drown out thoughts of home. I tackled every job with fervor, working through breaks and lunch hour without complaint. 10 hours later, Clyde interrupted, urging me to take a break and noting my intense focus. Apologizing for my demeanor, I followed Clyde to the break area, where he fetched us both hot coffee. Though it wasn't the best, the warmth was welcome. As I stared at the table, Clyde encouraged me to open up, insisting on hearing the full story. For the next 10 minutes, I poured out everything to Clyde: my shame, humiliation, and April's contemptuous behavior. I recounted her threats aimed at preventing me from disrupting her affair, her willingness to sacrifice everything for her lover, and the disdain she showed when discussing their intimacy with Robin. It was clear she prioritized him above all else. Clyde was taken aback. April had always seemed like a good woman and mother to him. He had never suspected any trouble in their marriage. Seeing his brother's pain was heart-wrenching. Chris was a pillar of strength, a devoted father, a reliable provider, and a trustworthy friend to all in the garage. Clyde's anger flared at how April had broken and beaten Chris. "Chris, you can't let this slide. We'll help you fight back. This can't go unanswered." Concern etched Clyde's face as he spoke. Chris looked up, his expression defeated. "What can I do? If I divorce her, she'll take everything: child support, alimony, the house. She's using the kids against me. And that bastard she's with. They've got me cornered, and April's pulling the strings." Clyde shook his head angrily. "To hell with them both. We'll find out who he is and go after them. April's made her bed, now she can lie in it. We'll make some calls and figure it out." Chris shrugged. "But she won't tell me anything about him." "Doesn't matter. We'll find him and bring him down. And you know you can never take her back after this. She's crossed the line. She's not your loving wife anymore, she's just another man's plaything." A small smile flickered on Chris's lips. "You're right. My love for her turned to hate last night. And that hate is stronger now. I made sure she knows that." They talked further, then left work on time and headed to a nearby bar to strategize. Their friends joined them, offering unwavering support and assistance. This solidarity was what Chris had once believed he had with April, but it was now clear it had been a facade. Together, they devised a plan. At 7 o'clock that evening, Chris returned home. As he entered, he couldn't help but feel a pang of realization. It was no longer a home, it was just a house. In the family room, he found April watching their twins play. He stood there, imprinting the scene in his mind. But things were about to change. I met April's gaze as she observed me watching the kids, her smile carrying a subtle disdain that now resonated with clarity. It was a contemptuous smile, unraveling the facade of our supposedly idyllic family scene. The truth had revealed itself, with April as the architect of this elaborate deceit. As I turned away, her smile faltered, replaced by a downward glance. Retreating to the kitchen, I scanned the refrigerator, mechanically reheating leftover chicken and potatoes. Despite lacking appetite, I forced myself to eat, a necessary act to maintain my composure amid the brewing storm. Originally, I planned to discuss matters with the boys before bedtime, but Clyde advised against it. Delaying this conversation, however, would mark the initial step in the looming confrontation with April, a battle I anticipated losing, yet vowed to fight nonetheless. Seated with my meal, I ate in silence, each bite devoid of satisfaction. April soon joined me, occupying the opposite seat. Though she initiated conversation, her words, urging civility, struck me as ironic. Civilized? How about a cheating spouse and her betrayed husband? Though tempted to retort, I chose silence, opting to observe her reaction instead. Her attempt to rationalize our situation sparked my restrained response, a mere suggestion of paternity testing. April's ensuing anger was met with a calm caution, reminding her of our children's presence and the consequences of her actions on their world. Silence prevailed as I continued eating, my demeanor stoic and inscrutable. April's emotional plea for understanding fell on deaf ears as I maintained my composed facade. Despite her desperation, my lack of response spoke volumes, a silent declaration of disillusionment and resolve. This realization slowly dawned on April, punctuated by a flicker of fear, a glimpse of the consequences she now faced. "What are you planning?" Her tremulous inquiry betrayed her growing unease. "Are you going to make this hard for me?" Her plea echoed in the silence, met by my unwavering gaze, each chew of food a testament to my steadfast resolve. I cleared my throat, mustering the courage to speak. "I believe it's best if we postpone this discussion until the kids are in bed. Last night, I heard you out, despite my own feelings. I admit, I acted poorly afterward, leaving abruptly. I apologize for that. But I refuse to engage in this conversation while the children are still awake." April's demeanor softened, a hint of relief crossing her features. "Thank you for understanding. I accept your apology. Your words stung, but I know you were upset. I'll take the boys up soon, and then we can talk." As she passed by, her hand brushed my shoulder. I recoiled involuntarily, unable to suppress the visceral reaction. I joined the kids, attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy, though the looming changes weighed heavily on my mind. Could I accept being a compliant cuckold, enduring April's infidelity until she tired of her affair? Despite her assurances of love and commitment, I knew I couldn't resign myself to that fate. Later, around 9 o'clock, April returned to the family room, sinking into her chair with a weary sigh. "The boys are asleep now. They're growing up so fast, aren't they?" I nodded in agreement. "They're good boys. It's heartbreaking to think of the pain they'll endure through all of this." Perplexed, April interjected, "What pain? I thought you understood. There's no need for drastic action. Just give me this time, and then we can return to our family. I love you, and I want to remain your wife. This is just something I need to do." I regarded April, once my beloved partner, now a stranger in our fractured marriage. I had cherished our life together, unable to envision it without her. Yet, her refusal to acknowledge the gravity of her actions left me no choice. "April, I heard you out last night. You made your case. You claim to love me and wish to remain my wife. You say he's taking nothing from me. But your threats of taking everything, including our boys, made your intentions clear. You've left me with no illusions about our future." April listened, her expression shifting from anger to frustration as I voiced my grievances. Despite her protests, my words seemed to resonate with her on some level, piercing through the facade she had erected. "I understand that you see things differently, April," I continued, my tone tinged with disappointment. But what I heard from you last night was more than just reassurances. It was contempt. Contempt for me, for our marriage, for everything we've built together. You humiliated me, belittled my efforts, and threatened me with consequences you had already planned out. As my anger simmered beneath the surface, I couldn't help but confront her with the harsh reality of her actions. You pushed me into a corner, April, thinking I had no way out. But you forgot one thing: even a rat will fight when backed into a corner with nothing to lose. With a heavy heart, I made my decision clear. I'll be staying somewhere else for now. I'll come home after work to avoid upsetting the children. This marriage is no longer sustainable under these circumstances. April's plea for reconciliation tugged at my heartstrings, but I remained resolute. I'm sorry, April. Last night shattered any love I had left for you. You betrayed our vows, shattered our trust, and destroyed what we had. There's no turning back from that. Her desperate appeal to our wedding vows only served to reinforce my resolve. You broke your promises to me, April. You gave away what was sacred between us, leaving me with nothing but shattered dreams. I can walk away from that. And I will. Just not yet. I drove to Clyde's place after leaving home. He graciously offered me shelter for as long as I needed, understanding the gravity of the situation. I needed time to finalize our plan before embarking on a new chapter of my life. Over the next few days, I balanced work with spending evenings with my children, avoiding any further interaction with April. Despite her attempts to initiate conversation, I remained steadfast in my silence, even leaving abruptly when faced with her frustration. At work, during a break, one of our colleagues informed Clyde that everything was progressing as planned, hinting at potential developments in the coming days. All we could do now was exercise patience and wait for the pieces to fall into place. The routine remained unchanged until the following week. April's demeanor grew increasingly tense, though the children seemed oblivious to any shifts in the household dynamics. Charlie's innocent inquiry about my extended work hours was easily appeased, but April's persistent questioning went unanswered as I continued to distance myself, leaving soon after she put the kids to bed. Towards the end of the week, Clyde approached me in the break room and handed me a folder. Without uttering a word, he conveyed the importance of its contents. Inside were 2 sheets of paper, each bearing a name, Carl Cummings. He was a junior attorney at Lincoln, Rice, and Holmes, single, and significantly younger than me. April had visited his condo apartment twice that week, staying for extended periods each time. Now armed with a name and address, I couldn't help but wonder what qualities Carl possessed that prompted April to jeopardize our marriage. Yet, dwelling on the why was no longer my concern. Had April approached me sooner, perhaps things could have been different. But now, it was time to take action. I turned to Clyde for guidance, grateful for his leadership in navigating this ordeal. While the situation was mine to confront, having supportive friends like Clyde was a lifeline I desperately needed. Being a good man and a diligent worker had earned me their loyalty, and now I leaned on it more than ever. The process is already underway. The first step will be completed tonight. I'll give you a call at home once it's done. Make sure to have your cell phone with you. Once I call, you can inform her and put an end to this situation. Understood. Although knowing it was set in motion didn't bring satisfaction, I felt resigned to the course of action. This wasn't the ideal way I envisioned handling things, but April and her lover had backed me into a corner, leaving me no choice but to fight back in the only way I could. I wasn't a lawyer or a strategist. I was a mechanic, a man who relied on hard work to provide for his family. And I had loved April deeply. But her dissatisfaction with that was clear. So, I resolved to handle this in a way consistent with my principles, and she would soon realize that. Returning home, I joined my family for dinner as usual, engaging in conversation with April and the kids, feigning normalcy. After dinner, I spent quality time with the children, engaging in activities typical of a loving husband and father. April seemed more at ease tonight, perhaps reassured by my semblance of normalcy. Meanwhile, as Chris enjoyed time with his sons, Carl Cummings left his office building and headed to his apartment. Reflecting on his recent encounter with April, he marveled at her newfound boldness upon learning her husband was aware of their affair. Unbeknownst to him, his evening was about to take a drastic turn. As Carl passed through an alley, he was suddenly shoved and dragged into its depths by unknown assailants wearing ski masks. Held against the wall, he faced interrogation about April Phillips. Fearing for his life, Carl reluctantly admitted to knowing her, praying for his survival as he was warned never to associate with her again. I understand. Okay, maybe this was just a warning. He could handle that. I want to ensure you comprehend this clearly. My friends, and I don't think a person like you, who engages in affairs with married women, is very intelligent. So, we're going to make sure you get the message. With that, he was forced to stand up straight. As he struggled to regain his balance, the first blow struck him in the solar plexus, causing him to double over. Despite his attempt to fall, he was held upright, enduring subsequent blows to his ribs and jaw. The pain threatened to overwhelm him, and he lost consciousness after a few more hits. They continued to strike him until they finally ceased. Bringing him back to awareness, they drilled into him what he was to remember, repeating it relentlessly. He recalled nothing further until he woke up in the emergency room. While his injuries weren't life-threatening, he was admitted for observation. He offered a silent prayer of gratitude for his survival. Instructed on what to say if she called, he rehearsed the words to himself, vowing never to pursue a married woman again, regardless of the circumstances. My phone rang just after 8 p.m. while I was with the twins, prompting me to excuse myself to answer it privately. Seeing Clyde's name on the caller ID, I listened to his brief message, "It's done. Lesson 1 delivered. He's been admitted at Memorial." Closing the call, I returned to the family room with a smile, which April noticed but didn't comment on. Believing it was positive news, she eventually took the kids upstairs, leaving me alone to await her return. When she came back with coffee, she expressed relief at my seeming acceptance of the situation, reiterating her love and fear of losing me. However, I had something important to share. "April, I need you to listen carefully. I know your lover is Carl Cummings, a junior lawyer at Lincoln, Rice, and Holmes. I know all about him, and I know you've seen him, even twice more this week." April appeared taken aback, her expression betraying a desire to respond, but I gestured for her to remain silent. "Here's the thing. You threatened me with divorce. When I showed my anger, you threatened to strip away everything I have. I remember your words vividly. They're etched into my memory. You said, 'I will take everything you have.' Though you said more, those were the words that lingered, words of contempt that shattered our marriage. They were meant to back me into a corner, leaving me no choice but to watch you engage with another man while I stood by. I warned you the next day that cornered rats fight back." I noticed the first signs of fear and discomfort on her face. She didn't know what was coming, but she sensed it wouldn't be pleasant. Her shoulders tensed, and she instinctively lowered her head. "I'm aware you told Robin that I never made you feel the way he did and that you belong to him. It's regrettable it must end, considering your enjoyment, but Mr. Cummings has been informed unequivocally that his involvement with you is terminated. He's to have no further contact with you, ever. He's agreed to these terms." I observed her shock and disbelief as I continued. "I'll initiate divorce proceedings citing infidelity. While we reside in a no-fault state, I have ample evidence to substantiate the grounds. There'll be child support to ensure our sons lack for nothing. As long as you fulfill your responsibilities as a parent, I'll ensure you have financial support. However, if you desire additional comforts, you'll need to work for them. I'll handle the legalities, including covering the cost of the divorce." April rose, her face ablaze with anger. "You're delusional if you think I'll accept that. And I'll follow through on my promise to take everything you have. Just wait." Despite her fear, she remained defiant, determined to bluff her way through as planned. "Why not call your Mr. Cummings right now? Check in with him. Oh, wait. Perhaps you should ring Memorial Hospital instead. The call I received earlier informed me he's in their emergency room. I imagine he's been admitted by now. Feel free to use my phone. I already have his number saved for you." Susan stared at me in horror. "What have you done? What happened to Carl? Oh, my God. Chris, what did you do?" "Why, April, whatever do you mean?" I've been here at home with you all evening. Earlier, I was at work, so I couldn't possibly have been involved in anything. Why would you think I've done something? You made it abundantly clear this was none of my concern. My demeanor must have alarmed April. She had never seen this side of me. Usually calm and gentle, I had never harmed anyone. I had even refrained from physically disciplining the children, leaving that to her. But now, she saw me differently, cold, unyielding, with eyes devoid of emotion. April walked into the adjacent room, and I overheard her conversation on the phone. When she returned, tears filled her eyes as she slumped into a chair, staring into the distance. I remained composed, casually flipping through a newspaper. I knew what she had just heard. Her lover was cutting ties with her. It was either that or face the repercussions from 3 intimidating men who intercepted him leaving work that day. They made it clear why he was being confronted and what awaited him if he dared to see or speak to April again. They wanted to ensure he understood, and their demonstration landed him in the emergency room. Wiping her tears, April sighed heavily and looked at me. Well, it seems you win. Carl told me he could never see me again. He said he would have all my things sent back to me. He never wanted to talk to me again. Seems like you're taken care of then. My lawyers will handle everything. It should be resolved swiftly, I replied, laying down the paper and preparing to leave. I'll speak to the boys this weekend, explain why we're getting divorced. Maybe they're old enough to comprehend. If not, they'll grow up and remember. As I turned to walk away, I glanced back to see April, utterly defeated, in tears. Remember your words, April? You said your affair would blow over quickly, and things could return to normal. I let out a bitter, resentful laugh. You're still young and attractive, April. Perhaps you'll find someone who shares your twisted fantasies. Someone open to an unconventional marriage, letting you indulge in as many affairs as you desire. I couldn't do it, but that's just me. Good luck. Children might not grasp it, but adults must face the repercussions of their actions. And sometimes, those consequences are harsh. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new videos.